Well, we will go ahead and get started. I see some people that are still logging in, but in the interest of respecting that everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get going. For those of you that may not know me, I'm Frank Williams, and I'm a Brunswick County Commissioner. Had the privilege of serving as the chair of the board for 4 years, including during the storm that you see on your screen, which was Hurricane Florence. And Florence was certainly the defining moment of my tenure as a commissioner, and it was just quite the learning experience for me in that role. And I know what I observed then, number one, was there were lots of people who had moved to Brunswick County that was their first significant hurricane. And that's been a few years. We've got a lot of new people who moved here since Florence that didn't experience Florence. And so the purpose of this is just to provide those who are interested with some information on how to prepare your home, your family, and your business for hurricane season. And I'll introduce our guest speakers here in a moment. A couple of disclaimers. Number one, this event is not produced or promoted at taxpayer expense. It was produced by myself and the 2 volunteers that are on the call, and the promotion was done and paid for through my campaign committee. So no taxpayer funds were involved. Secondly, we're providing this information as information, but it should not be considered a guarantee that that things are going to work out perfectly. You can't control what happens in a storm. So I wanted to put out that disclaimer that while we do the best we can to provide information to help people prepare, that there's no guarantee of safety. So we're going to cover a couple of main topics today. The first one, as I mentioned, is preparing your home and your family. And Commissioner Randy Thompson will speak about that in a moment. The second is preparing your business, and Rick Paxton, who I'll introduce in a moment, will cover that topic. And the third is something that I believe is so important, is where to obtain accurate, credible information and news. And I'll be the one speaking about that. I think that's so important in this age of fake news, to make sure if there's an emergency that you're getting good information, and that if you're sharing it, that you're sharing good information. So we'll dig into that in a moment. Our presenters for today, first is Commissioner Randy Thompson. He is the current chair of the Brunswick County Board of Commissioners. He previously, before he was elected, was our county's emergency services director and has public safety and emergency management experience in a number of jurisdictions prior to coming to Brunswick County. And during my tenure from 2021 to 22, as president of the Association of County Commissioners, he was the chair of my 100 Counties Prepared Task Force. Our second presenter is Rick Paxton. Rick is a small business owner, so he's got that perspective on how to prepare your business. He's a U.S. Coast Guard veteran. He served on the team that wrote the Maritime Security Plan for North Carolina and has served as the U.S. Coast Guard representative for the Brunswick Nuclear Power Plant Task Force. And he also responded to Hurricanes Floyd, which was another one that did a significant damage in this area, and Charlie. And he has a master's degree in Homeland Security and a DBA, which I believe is a doctorate in business administration. And Rick, you can correct me if that's wrong, in Homeland Security, Leadership, and Policy. So I'm thankful to have them with me and appreciate and look forward to their insight. And with that, I will before I turn it over to Commissioner Thompson, I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm a past chair of the Brunswick County Board of Commissioners. As I mentioned, I served as chair during Hurricanes Florence, Dorian, and Isaias. When I'm not a commissioner, I'm a public relations and communication professional, which is why I wanted to talk about the information component. And a couple of years ago, I was president of the Association of County Commissioners, and my initiative was focused on preparedness training for elected officials. And it was born out of my experience serving as chair during Hurricane Florence. So as I said, that was the single defining moment of my tenure as a commissioner, and it's something that I just believe is so very important. With that, we're going to move on to preparing your home and your family, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Thompson, thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you, Frank, and let me thank Frank again for pulling this together for us. This is obviously, for me, this is one of my key areas of concern for not only our county, our municipalities, our state, but our country. If you follow the news, leaving the politics out of it, follow the news about disasters, you will see that it happens quite frequently across our country. Being prepared and knowing what to do when you fall into the threat of a disaster is of key importance. Planning after the disaster gets there is not the time to be successful with your plan. So I want to go ahead and get started right off the bat. I want to thank everybody again for joining us. I follow the 12 ways to prepare. Always have. I look at it as an easy way to kind of have a checklist. And if you can put a check in each one of the boxes that you see on the slide this afternoon, you will certainly be as prepared as you possibly can be. I want to say that information like you're seeing on the screen is readily available. One of the best places to go to here in North Carolina is readync.gov. Readync.gov will provide you with just an abundance of information, and you can actually pull from that and see what fits your family and in your particular setting that you're in. As Frank mentioned earlier, that he'll be getting into toward the end of this, you'll hear a lot about communications and accurate information. As you can see on the first slide that we have, signing up for alerts and warnings. Communications is extremely important to know when to react and when to go. And I will tell you that there are several pieces of alerts and notifications that you can acquire that will assist you in your emergency planning. Obviously, the emergency alerts, the EAS broadcast, as many of us have always heard over the years on our radios and televisions. Primarily, we hear that during test times. Once a month, you hear that noise go off on your media, and you know that it is working. They'll cut into the channel to do it during programs and things like that. That is a huge opportunity that your local media has to communicate emergency information with you. Then there's years ago we used to hand them out quite a bit. The NOAA weather radios. You still see weather radios available, and you can put those in your homes. And upon the event of something happening, or either where conditions are favorable, you will see that weather radio alert you and provide you with a message from your local radio, local weather station. Then you have your wireless alerts, which is available to you on your on most of your cell phones. And then locally, you'll find that here, especially here in Brunswick County, we have the what's called as a code red alerts. And it's something that you can sign up for by going to the website with Brunswick County. It's brunswickcountync.gov /emergency/management. And you will be able to sign up to get those direct information links to advise you about things going on in Brunswick County. Now, it's probably my understanding that we probably have people outside of Brunswick County on this today. So I would share this with you, that each and every county has some type of alert notification system. So if you go to your county's website and search through it, just most of the time it's on their immediate homepage. And you'll see how you can sign up for whatever alert notification system that they have within that county. Some of the municipalities have them as well, and you can certainly attach to that. So I want to talk briefly about to make a plan. And one of the things that you need to keep in mind about a plan, you need to know what to do now, you need to know what to do during, and you need to know what to do after a storm impacts you. You prepare now, you learn how to monitor, you look at your evacuation routes, you get your emergency supplies together, you protect your property as it needs it, and then you make sure that you identify all your critical records. All of that is stuff that you can do now in the process of making your plan. Now, whenever I talk about evacuation readiness, that is huge. You can go to a website that the state has set up. It's called zone.nc.gov. And in that, there's a zone listed for those that are in critical areas, potential flooding, and zones A through E is, I believe, is what the state has produced. And it will give you criteria on when the evacuation is going to be called for in those areas. So whenever you hear a news alert and they talk about we're evacuating or recommending evacuations of zone A, B, and C, you need to know what zone you're in. And you can very easily do that by going to that website. It has an address box on it. You can type your address in it, and it will tell you whether you're in a zone or out of a zone, and that will certainly help you. Now I want to move on to during the event, and that the key thing there is survive. You got to make sure if you haven't decided to evacuate, you haven't put in your if you put in your plan notifications and the communications piece of this, and there's another little slide that we'll talk about in a minute about family communications piece that I'll provide you with a little bit more information on. But that is key, being able to determine what you're going to do when the storm hits, and making sure that you follow all the local guidance as best as possible, and making sure that you've got all your essential needs in what we call a go bag, so that you'll be ready to move on a moment's notice if need be. After the storm, whether you're either traveling back in or you're getting back out of your sheltered place, whether that's your home, you just need to be safe. Things are going to be disoriented. Animals are going to be disoriented. The environment's certainly going to be changed from when you last saw it or whenever you went into your shelter place. So you need to be careful about the return. And again, you need to be listening to the warnings that are being posted by your local officials. If we move on to save for a rainy day, it's always good to make sure that you've got cash on hand. At a lot of times when we choose to relocate, sometimes by the storm's path, you'll find that some areas inland get hit just as bad, if not as worse, as our coastal areas do. Sometimes they're not as in tune to have backup systems in place. And a lot of times their systems go down and they can't take credit cards and things like that. So it's always good to make sure that you've got cash on hand in your go bag to be able to deal with that scenario. The practice for drills, practice makes perfect. And so if you do a plan, I always used to let everybody know whenever I was in emergency services, we didn't have shelf plans. You don't do a plan and then put it on the shelf and say, well, we'll pull it down if we need to and we'll read it then. It's something that you constantly have to put into play, and you have to look at and understand exactly what your part in the plan is and what the expectations of others are. Testing that communications plan, and that's one of the things that I said is probably most important and extremely important, is making sure that you stay informed, making sure that you share your contact information with others. It's always good to pre-identify someone outside of the area, especially if you're going to take more than one vehicle to evacuate and you're evacuating with other family members. You need to make sure that someone has that contact point or is at that contact point that you're planning on evacuating to, and make sure that all the parties within your communications plan with your family has that ability. Keep in mind, there's a lot of things to look for, like the advisories that you get, where the conditions look to be where they're going to significantly change, and so the authorities will put out advisories, and then it'll go from that to a watch whenever the impact is imminent within 48 hours. You'll see that watch come on, and then the warning follows that, and that's about 36 hours before we actually see a major impact. So all of those things need to be in your overall plan, but you need to be communicating in your communications plan to know that. Making sure that you've got the safeguarding of your documents, making sure that any documents that if you decide to evacuate or if you stay in, you need to make sure that your documents are secure. You need, and whenever I say documents, talking about everything from your passports to your checkbooks to your insurance documents. It's always good to take pictures, have all of those inventoried, and you need to make sure that those are in some type of container that will not be impacted by any type of weather condition, and that you can either travel with them or you can secure them in a place. Whenever we talk about planning with your neighbors, want to make sure that you have discussed that you're gonna be out of town, and making sure where I live, I know where all of my where the majority of my neighbors are on a daily basis. It's just part of being in the environment that I'm in. Making your home safer. Again, the key there is to make sure that if you decide to board up, if you have shutters, whatever items that you're utilizing, if you're in a flood prone area, making sure that you've gotten most of your electronic devices and other items secured above that impacted area that you feel might occur. Whenever we talk about that, making your home safer, it's your home and your neighbor's home. So any kind of yard furniture, grills, any type of lawn chairs, anything that can be picked up and moved by the weather, by the winds, and become projectiles, those are things that need to be moved and make not only your home safer, but your neighbor's home safer. Knowing your evacuation routes, I've already shared with you about the going to zonenc.gov, but it says you're not in one of those zones, and it appears that the area is still going to be impacted that you're in. In your plan, you need to plan for that. You need to know where your inland shelter is going to be. You need to have a plan for your pets. And you can go to ready.gov/animals, a perfect plan there to review, to assist you with that, but plan for everyone. We need to plan for our parents, our grandparents, our children. We need to make sure everyone is in our plan, and there's a way to address each one of those. And then make sure that your vehicles are ready, make sure that they're topped off with fuel, and make sure that you have selected that evacuation route, and that evacuation route. You're always able to utilize the North Carolina DOT. They have a special number that you can call, provide you with road updates if you start to see some slowdowns anywhere. 211 is always another good one to provide you with additional information in the readiness mode that you're in. Always remember in your go bag, remember where it says assemble all your supplies or update your supplies. Keep in mind, one of the biggest is your meds. I know whenever I turned of age, that I had the opportunity to understand the importance of my meds. So I've certainly that is part of my go bag, and making sure that I've got plenty for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, with evacuations and with storms, you can't just plan for a 7-day little container. You need to plan for extended periods of time. So you need to make sure that you've got that information available to you. Getting involved with your community. Let me just say this about getting involved with your community. Not too long ago, well, I guess it's been a little over a year and a half ago, we experienced a tornado here in Brunswick County. I can tell you that the community turned out in full force. Well over on just one day, well over 300 volunteers showed up to engage to assist those areas that had been impacted. Your community is going to be there. One of the best things that I think our county has done is making sure that we've got a volunteer coordinator, which that position does a lot more things than just coordinating with volunteers, but to have someone that's able to put a plan in place. And there's a lot of ways that you can get involved to assist in the event that your community is impacted. And then lastly, again, documents and insure the property. You know, I can't say enough about taking pictures of everything before the disaster, of your home. And I know Rick's going to talk about your business, another huge area because of SBA. You know, you're going to be looking at insured losses. And so you want to make sure that things are going to be covered. Your insurance company is going to be asking for that assistance if you have it. So I would certainly recommend that you not only have your insurance policies available, but you document everything as well. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Frank for the moment.
Thank you, Randy. And we will have a link at the end where you can find a lot of the information that Randy has covered and that Rick and I will cover. So don't feel like you've got to try to write all this down. If you're a note taker like me, you don't have to capture it all. I do want to touch on the last bullet that Randy mentioned about insuring your property. Obviously, in the past few years, we've seen a significant increase in property values in Brunswick County. So I would encourage you, if your insurance is more than a few years old, take your current valuation and go talk to your agent and make sure you've got enough coverage to cover the current value of your house, because what you bought a few years ago may not cover it now. I know this because I recently had to increase my own coverage because of the increase in the valuation, and what I had was no longer sufficient. So I did wanted to throw that out. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Rick, and we're going to talk about preparing your business. So Rick, well, if you want to take it from here.
All right, Frank, thank you. So, you know, guys, preparing for your business is a lot like Randy said about preparing for your home. It's just a little bit more expansive. So you got to have a disaster preparedness plan in place, just like you would with your home, but it's be a little bit different. So depending on what your business type is, you may be required to have a preparedness plan. If you work in healthcare, if you have a healthcare business, assisted living, or somewhere that people live, you will be required by the federal government, or the state government rather, to have a disaster preparedness plan, and also DSS will want to have a copy of that. So those are things that you have to do. And just like Randy said, if you go to ready.gov and then /business, you can find a great opportunity there to see how one is made. They should have a plan there that you can probably fill in the blank and help you at least get started. And the same with the SBA, Small Business Administration, SBA.gov. If you go look for preparing for emergencies, they'll give you the same thing, the opportunity to see some templates for a business disaster or disaster preparedness plan. So, I mean, we cannot emphasize enough on the importance of this, because you're going to, when the storm hits, you're not going to be thinking about, well, what should I do? You're going to have it in front of you. You're going to have something to go by, because it's going to be such a mess. There's going to be so much chaos going on. Even if it's not a bad storm, there's still going to be a lot of nut stuff going on, right? People are going to be everywhere, but we want to make sure that we have a plan to consider that. Okay. So you got to also talk about your employees. Make sure that they know, and your customers, that they know what you're going to do, what your plan is going to say. If you are obviously in healthcare, such as an assisted living facility, you're not shutting the door. most likely all the people that work there are going to stay there because those folks are going to need 24/7 care. You're going to need to emphasize and reiterate that to the families of those people. If you're in a retail business and it's not a necessity for you to be open, I'm going to say it behooves you to close the doors and let your people go home and take care of their stuff. You got to take care of your folks just like you do your customers. Otherwise, you don't have a business, right? So make sure that your employees know exactly what's going to happen. Hey, we're going to close the doors. The hurricane's going to hit XYZ. We're going to close the doors 24 hours or 48 hours in advance. We're going to give you time to go home and prepare for your families and your home and do the things that Randy told you to do, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand, because if you don't have employees that come back, then your business suffers, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of as well. So the customers are the same thing. So like I said, if it's not a crucial retail business, something that people have to have, then it's probably a great idea to just shut those doors and let your customers know, hey, we intend on opening back up at XYZ time, whatever, it works best for where your operational area is. So you want to make sure that you get that out, via email or however it is you communicate with your clients. And that leads me back to the things that is very important with your business, and that's your files and business data. Make sure that you back up your computers or however you use your files. If that's keeping them in the cloud, then keep them in the cloud every day, up to every hour if you have to, in order to get as much of that stuff saved and, put away, so that if something happens and you lose power, you don't lose that information. The last thing any business wants to do is lose data that they've gathered over the time of their business. And that data could be customers, that data could be customers' orders, it could be a lot of things. And we all know that if you miss any of that, particularly on the order side, then you potentially may lose customers. And we don't want to do that because of a disaster that happened in the area. So be sure to back up every file you have. If you know a storm's coming, I'd probably back up every 30 to 45 minutes just to make sure. And I know that sounds time consuming, and it probably is, but this whole process is going to be time consuming. So you just need to plan for that as you plan in your business plan. Hey, I'm going to have to spend the time to do this. Okay. Keeping supplies on hand is just as important at your office or business as it is at your home. We need to make sure we have a first aid kit in the office, because if we get stuck there and someone gets hurt, and we all know that the first responders are going to be rather busy, we might need to at least try to get some stuff done there, to help if we can. First aid kits are great. Make sure you've got batteries and flashlights in your office, because you're going to lose power. I have been through 100 storms and I've never been through one that did not lose power, at least for a little while. So, preparing for that, and we'll talk about your physical structure here in a minute, but preparing for that, light bulbs, just simple stuff to keep in there to make sure you have things that you can survive and see and be able to, if you get stuck at work or if you're at one of those places where you cannot leave. Okay. So just make sure your supplies on hand are there, and you keep that part of your business part of the plan. Okay. Preventative maintenance checklist and schedule. That is so important. And what I mean by that is your building, whether you rent it or own it, is irrelevant. It's still up to you to make sure that it's going to be adhering to what your needs are, both not during disaster and during a disaster. So I always walk around my building to make sure things are secure every day, just to make sure. And that's just the nature of me, but I advise you to do the same. If you've got big windows and that's coming, a storm's coming, then it behooves you to block those windows. Because as much as we love our community, and Randy had a great point earlier about the community coming together. And nothing brings a community together like a bad storm. But at the same time, nothing brings out the knuckleheads as bad as something of that nature. So make sure it's difficult for them to come through your windows and steal your stuff. So if you need to block your windows, just like you would at your house, have that in place. If you have big picture windows in the front of your office or business, make sure you have the opportunity to have something, whether it's plyboard or whatever, to keep the windows from being broken, hopefully. But if they are, in the event that something comes in that direction, at least the plyboard or whatever you put there will help prevent that. Okay, so anything else that you can do around your building, you want to make sure that if you've got a roof that's leaky, you want to get that fixed. Because if it's leaky now, think about what it's going to do when it drops 40 inches of rain. It's going to be nuts. So you are going to have a bigger issue in the long run. So whether you own the building or you lease the building is irrelevant. If you lease the building and you have a leaky roof and you've been putting it off because you don't want to bother the landlord, because that's their job. You're paying them to do that. Okay. You know, and the quicker you get ahead of these things, the more it saves money in the long run. If you let that leaky roof go and then all of a sudden the storm comes, that leaky roof is going to be destroyed. And then everything in your business is going to be destroyed. So whatever you have property wise is going to be destroyed. I want to back up for just a minute because we were talking about protecting files. And, you know, Randy made a good idea about, you know, the insurance stuff and things like that. In my particular businesses, and I run two out of the same office, my office, I have computers, I have televisions, everything that's electronic, I have digitized and put into an electronic file with their serial numbers and everything that's important for the insurance folks. Just in the event any of that happens, every computer, television, heck, anything of any value, I make sure that I have listed, even my furniture, because there's a lot of furniture in your offices. Replacing that's not going to be cheap if you have to. All of that stuff are things that you need to maintain a log or a list of whatever it is that you have in order to provide that to an insurance company or your loss prevention folks. Okay. So let's get back to the preventative maintenance in your physical structure. Just like at your house, you know, you may have things outside at your office. You maybe, if you're a restaurant, for instance, you're a cafe, you've got chairs, you got umbrellas, you got tables, all of that stuff are projectiles during a storm. And we want to secure that the best we can, whether we bring it in, tie it down, whatever it is, but we want to do all that. Windows, like I said, we want to block to the best of our ability for a number of reasons. Number one, we don't want things to fly through, but we also don't want glass flying through. You get glass flying through, then someone's definitely going to get hurt. It's going to cut somebody, it's going to stick into somebody. There's a lot of options there. And there are so many things flying through the air in a hurricane. For you folks that have not been through one, prepare anything, or you can imagine anything that can fly through the air. And what we also have to remember is that every hurricane spawns our even least favorite thing, and that's tornadoes. Every time. So, and we don't know, they're coming, it's done, right? So hurricane, we have several days to choose and see what's going on. Is it going to hit here? Is it going to go north? Is it going to go south? Is it going to die at sea? A tornado, we don't have that option. And those are the two biggest problems I see in this area, other than flooding, which is spawned on by hurricanes typically. So your physical structure, as you prepare it and make sure everything is secure, just keep all that in mind. It's just like you would do your house. You would treat your business just like you would do your house, because you're going to have to go back to that business at some point, particularly if you're the owner and you don't want to go back to a mess, because that's just going to take longer for you to recoup and get back into every day of business. Okay. So prepping your physical structure, like I said before, and like Randy said before, check that flood map and see where you are, floodplain map, and see where you are. Because if you're in a heavy area, then you want to make sure that you've got a plan for that. Okay. If you get a flooded place, you want to make sure that there's an opportunity for you to pump that water out, because it's going to be a while before the help comes. So if you can pump that water out on your own, that'll save, oh gosh, a whole lot of stuff. And I only know this because my brother's in that business in Florida, and I have seen how busy he gets during hurricane season very quickly. So when you get flooded, first thing you want to do is try to get that water out as quickly as possible, if it's possible. But check those floodplain maps and see where you are. You know the wind is going to be tough. Make sure you remove those loose objects from around your building so they don't fly through your window or through somebody else's window or hurt somebody else. And that's pretty much it for your business. You know, it's very similar to your home, just a little more intense because of it's a business. And, you know, you make your livelihood there, and people come to work and make their livelihoods there as well. So that's all I got. Back to you, Frank. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. And if any of you have questions, we'll get those at the end, but there is a Q&A function on this webinar, and you can put your questions there. A couple of things I wanted to mention about your business. Number one, and this goes back to protecting your electronics. and this is something I did during Florence. A lot of times you'll have a computer sitting on a floor by your desk. Unplug everything if there's a hurricane coming. And if it's sitting on the floor, put it up on the desk just in case there's a leak. That carpet's going to hold that water and that's going to get in your computer. I was glad I did that during one of the storms because we had a roof leak and the carpet right around where my computer would have been was completely soaked. A second thing, if you rely on receiving supplies, think about how the storm could impact your supply chain. If you're a restaurant, you may not want to have as many supplies if your power is going to be out and you don't have backup power, because then you're going to have a refrigerator full of rotten food. But if you rely on other supplies, you may want to get ahead of the game and get things delivered ahead of time. So think about those. And think about how to maintain continuity of operations if your facility is inaccessible for an extended period of time, or if you can't get there, but it still needs to operate. So just think about those few things. And I'm going to move on now to talking about obtaining an accurate information. And we all have heard the term fake news, and hopefully you react like the guy on the screen does when you see things that you know are not accurate. But unfortunately, all too often people see things that are not accurate and they share them rather than scrutinize them. And then the more it gets shared, the more legs it gets and the harder it is to get the correct information out there. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to get accurate information and where to get accurate information. So the first thing I want to talk about is beware of rumors. If you hear a rumor, don't repeat it, verify it. I spent sometimes all day, every day during Hurricane Florence on social media responding to rumors and things that I saw being put out there, and going back and forth with our county staff to get the correct information to respond with. But if beware of a rumor and be careful about spreading something that you hear. Also, be alert for sensationalized headlines or news stories. And a lot of times you'll have a otherwise benign news story and the headline makes it sound like the world's coming to an end. Be careful what you share. Unfortunately, there are some news outlets that do like to sensationalize things to get more clicks and to get more traffic. Just be careful of what you share, especially if it's not from a site you're familiar with. Scrutinize every social media post about an emergency or about a storm, even if it's from somebody you would normally trust. I've got friends and family members that have shared some wildly inaccurate things that they saw someone else post. And then I had to go privately to them and ask them to take it down because they were sharing things that simply were not adding to the dialogue positively. And I also want to talk about something called fake weather. And I had never heard this term till about a year ago. And I was at Brunswick County's hurricane seminar, and I believe it was one of our local meteorologists used it. And we've probably all seen where there'll be a small cloud swirl 2 miles off the coast of Africa, and there are 100 different models about what it might do. And some website picks up the 1 out of 100 that looks like it's going to be a Category 5 making landfall here. And that's the only one they published because it's going to get people fired up and it's going to generate clicks and engagement on their social media platform. So be careful about sharing things like that are obviously sensationalized. Try to get your weather information from credible, reputable sources. If it's a site you've not heard of, maybe don't share that. Go somewhere else to get the information before you share it. And similar to all the other plans, plan ahead of time on where you're going to get accurate information. Don't wait till the rain started to fall to think about how am I going to get updates on what's going on locally. And I'll talk about where to get that information in just a moment. So where to get accurate information. In Brunswick County, I strongly encourage you to follow Brunswick County government. We have an email list, and you'll have a link later where you can sign up for that. But the county does send out emails. We have social media profiles on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and even on Nextdoor. And I encourage you to follow those because our staff is very diligent about putting out information. As Randy mentioned earlier, we have code red alerts where you can get text messages and phone calls. I got one in the middle of the night last night about a severe thunderstorm warning. I'll have a link again in a moment where you can sign up for those, but I'd strongly encourage you to sign up or follow all of these. And our Brunswick County Sheriff's Office also does an amazing job, and they have a Facebook page and also a mobile app that same link I'm going to share in a moment will direct you to where you can download that. These are all places that you're going to get information that we've done our absolute best to vet and make sure it's credible before we put it out. If you live in a city or town, you should also follow that city or town for their information. One thing that's important to know is the county may declare a state of emergency, but if you live in a town, that town needs to declare its own state of emergency, and it may or may not have the same details as the one the county shares or declares. So you need to follow your city or town to get their information as well. I strongly encourage you to follow the National Weather Services page for Wilmington. And then other credible meteorologists who aren't going to sensationalize their reports. I had one that I followed and I unfollowed him because half of what he talked about had nothing to do with weather. And I didn't want to share information from someone who half of what they're talking about was not relevant to the situation. North Carolina Emergency Management has active social media profiles, and I encourage you to follow those. And as just with your plan, follow those profiles now and sign up for those emails and texts now. You know, when the sky's blue is the time to prepare for the emergency that's going to eventually come. And don't spread inaccurate information. Verify something before you post it if you're not absolutely certain it's from a credible source. And if you only see it one place, maybe don't share that. So those are just some ways and places to get accurate information. The QR code that is on your screen has a link to a page on my website that has links to all of these places, to readync.gov, to how to sign up for the code red alerts. And if for some reason you can't get the QR code to work, it's at commissionerfrankwilliams.com/preparedness. And you should be able to get all the information and links out to all these sites that Randy and Rick and I have discussed should be available there. If you see something that's not there that you think should be there, please let me know and I'll do my best to get that added. One person in the Q&A mentioned getting insurance to cover your income, and I think that's probably especially important for business owners if there's an income replacement insurance. Also, if you're an employee of a business that could be affected by a storm, you may want to get some insurance to cover that as well. And I'm not an insurance expert, so I'm assuming that there are some available policies on that. Any other questions or anything else anyone wants to share? Or Randy or Rick, do y'all have any final comments you'd want to share?
The only thing I would say, kind of following up with your communications thing, is if the incident commander who's going to be running the show is only going to have one person that puts out information, that public information officer, and that's going to be the gospel. So
Absolutely.
if you get a hold of that, then you're good to go. And that's all I'll say about that.
And you should be able to get that at the places that I listed earlier. And that's why I listed those, is because they're going to be credible sources. And it is important to get what's accurate information. One of the things I learned as an elected official is not everything that I receive is ready for public consumption, especially in an emergency. There are things for situational awareness, but I needed to be judicious about when I shared things, because sometimes it's, hey, we heard this, we're still vetting it. I don't need to share it until it's vetted and accurate, and make sure that what I'm putting out helps and doesn't hurt. You know,
Absolutely.
I don't want to be the person that announces that a road's open when that road's not ready for travel, and you start coming home and the road's still flooding.
Well, we all know that the backdoor radio, everybody talking in the back roads, does not work.
Yeah,
You know, they assume this is that or this, and we all know what assumption gets us. So
you know what you get when you assume.
that's right.
And I would just add one thing to always keep in mind: if you're following your information from your local media stations, keep in mind, if we're talking about Brunswick County, or if we're talking about Columbus County, Robeson County, all of those counties join the state of North Carolina. I'm sorry, state of South Carolina. Keep in mind, things are different in South Carolina on their decision-making arc. So you need to be aware of that when you're listening to media releases. You need to know exactly where they're talking about, because again, a lot of information between South Carolina and North Carolina, it can differ. And it may or may not be the source of information. So you need to really clarify where you're receiving your information at. It is always better to go locally and get it from your local area. But just keep in mind, as close as we are in some of our adjoining counties to South Carolina, they do things a little bit differently in South Carolina. So you need to make you need to be aware that that is occurring. All the information is the same as far as what we've covered in both North Carolina and South Carolina. The alerts are available, maybe just the local communication piece is a little bit different. But your plan's still the same, your evacuation routes still remain the same, but you just need to be aware of that public information depending upon your source of receiving it. Just know where it's coming from so that you're able to take the appropriate action if needed.
I think that's excellent point. And if you live 10 miles from South Carolina and you're evacuating into South Carolina, you may want to check their emergency information before you make that choice. And you know, Randy, you mentioned something about the media, and that spurred a thought. One of the things that I observed during Florence is the media would make a good faith effort to cover us, but they would interview me, and I'm one of 10 counties they're talking to. And I did a 30-minute interview on things related to Brunswick County, and 30 seconds of it got on the news. So you're going to get some amount of information from the media, but I would encourage you in an emergency, as much as you can, go direct to the county or the city where you can get everything you need to know rather than just getting the 30-second soundbite that was edited because they had to fit it in with 10 other counties worth of information. Your HOAs may also have information related to what's going on in your community. And that's something I observed during Florence. My HOA actually designated area captains to check on their neighbors. And we're actually very proactive in making sure that we had a system to know where everybody who lived in the community was during the storm. And I was very impressed with that. And they did their job. They came around and checked and were helping people. You know, we had a lot of seniors, some of whom did not anticipate not being able to get supplies for as long as was the case, and did not expect to be out of power for as long as was the case. And that HOA was actually a very invaluable network to help within our community. So that's something to consider as well. Rick, Randy, anything else?
No, that's it for me.
I think you've covered everything pretty well.
And
Yep.
well, thank you both for your help and for your participation. This is recorded, so we'll be posting this later on. So for any of you who are on here, I'm guessing you're probably the ones who are already knew most of this. That's usually how this goes. The people who need to know something aren't the ones who tune in. Please share this or share the link that's on your screen with people who might need this information. You know, the more prepared we all are, the better off our whole community will be. And I thank you again for your time. The next one of these events will be on a different topic. It's going to be on August the 10th, and it will be on transportation. And I've got Chad Kimes, our DOT division engineer. We're going to discuss how projects are prioritized, how planning works in North Carolina, and also what projects are ongoing or coming up here in Brunswick County. And I'll be announcing that very soon. But thank you all for participating. Have a good day.